Welcome to Fargo Effects. This is Jason. As many of you know who've been following the channel, I have a bit of a fascination with metallurgy. I guess that kind of makes sense for somebody who does a lot of projects that involve blacksmithing or knife making. And recently I had an opportunity to buy some AR500 steel. And for those who don't know, AR500 is a common steel for making metal targets. But what I recently learned is if you look at body armor, one of the really common ways to keep prices low is to use plates of AR500 steel. So a couple of months ago, I noticed that a company named Spartan was having a really good deal on AR500 steel body armor. And because I've been wanting to test this stuff out and see how tough it really is, I jumped at the chance to pick some up. They rate this armor based on what types of bullets it will stop. And this armor was rated at level 3, which means it's supposed to stop some of the lower velocity rifle threats in addition to all of the pistol threats. But as I did a little more research, I found out that what they sometimes call level 3 plus, that's supposed to provide a level of protection against even some very high velocity rounds that are actually designed to penetrate through a certain amount of armor. But unfortunately, if you want to get that type of armor, you basically have two choices. Either you spend a whole ton of money, or you have to settle for a really, really heavy plate, because it has to be thicker if it's going to stop a really high velocity or armor-piercing threat. So anyway, in the plate carrier vest, there's a pocket in there where the armor fits. And one of the things I noticed right away is that pocket is actually quite a bit larger in thickness, front to back, than the plate is. And I suppose that's because there are some plates, especially the composite ceramic plates and some of the more high-end plates, tend to be thicker, maybe even up to an inch thick or more. And so the pocket has to be able to accommodate them. So that got me thinking, maybe I could design something that would go behind that steel plate and would extend the usefulness of that into that maybe 3+ range. So what I did is I completely ripped off a build from ZNAproductions. I'm not even going to pretend that he wasn't my primary source for this. I'm just going to give him full credit. But anyway, what he did and what I did is found a relatively inexpensive fiberglass fabric. I looked around online and tried to find the cheapest one I could, and then realized that if I just ran to Harbor Freight, I could pick up one of these, I don't know if they call it a welding blanket or whatever, that you put down, and the fiberglass catches any sparks and slag and stuff that fall. But it also has this added benefit of being a very, very thick and heavy weave. And for those who don't know, way back when they were first experimenting with what could be considered maybe modern bullet-resistant armor, one of the materials they experimented with was fiberglass fabric that had been impregnated with a resin and then cured under very high pressure. And it does have a pretty good strength-to-weight ratio, probably better than any steel they had available at the time. I don't know that I would say it's better than the real high-tech steel we have today. But anyway, that's kind of what this experiment is about. I wanted to test this as a backer to my AR500 steel plates to see if it would add a significant amount of bullet resistance. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the actual build portion of this. As you can see here, I'm kind of just going through the process. I cut out, I think, 22 pieces from this blanket. I stacked them. I used the fiberglass resin, and then I clamped that in between two plates. These are actually small plates. These are the kind that you would wear on the side. But if you want to see this process in greater detail, I'll have a link in the description below where you can go and check out ZNAproductions, check out his video. He did a great job with it. But mostly what I want to cover in this video is the results I got using this as a backing material to the AR500 steel plate. And I had a couple of ideas to test. We'll get into that here in a second. But first I want to say I used 5.56 millimeter rounds. For those who don't know, that's the sort of standard NATO military round, but it's also a hunting round and sporting round. The bullets that I'm using are not like military grade armor piercing. They're just regular you would buy like at a sporting goods store. And then the other rifle I'm using is a much more powerful rifle. This is a 30-06. It's much more typical of the hunting rifles rather than those kind of intermediate military rounds. So to begin with, I want to make it clear that this is level 3 armor, and as I understand it, is not rated to stop the 5.56 round. But I wanted to see for myself whether a typical 5.56 would go through it. I'm at a range of 15 yards or less. One other thing I should mention, the way I set this up originally, I had a small like foam rubber pad separating the AR500 steel from my fiberglass plate. And I guess my reasoning behind that was that as the bullet penetrates that first plate, there's likely to be some deformation on the back of the steel plate, and I didn't want that to directly contact the surface of the fiberglass plate, because at least in my mind it seemed like that might actually compromise the fiberglass And as you'll see a little bit later, the whole system is actually more effective without any barrier between the two plates. So I tried it both ways, and again, you'll see that as the test unfolds. So the first shot here is the 5.56 millimeter. I'm going to give a rough estimate, neighborhood of 2,800 feet per second. Don't expect me to convert everything to metric, but I will say that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 meters per second. So again, much faster than a handgun round, and really velocity-wise similar to a hunting round, but because it's a much lighter bullet, it's nowhere near the power, and you'll see that here in a minute. So that first impact looks pretty impressive, I think, especially in slow motion. I don't have like a super high-speed camera or anything, so I can't capture like actual fragments coming off. But you can get a sense that the bullet sort of exploded when it hit the surface. You can see that in the dust that gets kicked up in front. And when you examine the actual point of impact, you can also see that this bullet failed to penetrate the armor. And I really have to hand it to Spartan because, as I understand it, that's level 3 plus performance out of a level 3 plate. In fact, as I examined this a little more, it looked like that bullet didn't even come close to penetrating the armor. So again, this is not an armor-piercing bullet. This is the type of, inexpensive ammo you'd buy to use at the range. But with that said, it is a very narrow bullet moving at extremely high velocity, and I really would have expected it to penetrate that armor. So needless to say, on that round, I did not get to test the strength of my fiberglass plate. But next, it's time to pull out the big guns. Literally. So again, this is a 30-06. I looked up the ballistics on these bullets, and they'll be moving at about the same speed as the 5.56, but this bullet weighs almost 3 times as much. So you're looking at very close to 3 times the power. And although this is not a full metal jacket bullet, this is a soft point bullet designed for hunting. When you're talking about a bullet that's moving that fast and weighs that much, this is a 150 grain bullet. I had high hopes for this one passing directly through that front plate and maybe through everything. Now, I don't know how obvious it was there, but that bullet did not actually pass all the way through both the steel plate and the fiberglass plate. And I didn't do a really great job of capturing what the hole looks like in the steel plate until later. But you can see me here kind of picking at the fiberglass. And what I found there is that there was definitely damage to the back of it. So I think the bullet, it's possible that some fragments actually penetrated through the back of it, but it seemed that most of that 30-06 round was actually stuck in the fiberglass itself. Now, honestly, I would consider this a failure because even if a few small fragments get through, that can still do an awful lot of damage. And it's also important to note that there is some deformation on the back of the fiberglass plate, and that in itself, that could do a lot of damage to a person's ribs or soft tissue or other parts of the body. So I would say that this combination, at least with that layer of foam in between, and we'll get into that here in a second too, I'm going to call this a failure. Now, unfortunately, I lost a little bit of footage in here. I must not have had the camera recording when I thought I did. I took a couple more shots, both with the lighter 5.56 round and took another shot with the 30-06. And what you'll see here with the 30-06, once I removed that layer of foam rubber between the two plates, I think you'll actually be able to see that the jacket, the copper jacket of the 30-06 bullet is stopped by the steel plate and gets lodged in that plate, while the lead core of that bullet actually travels through. It's really fascinating to me. I mean, it does almost no damage at all to that fiberglass plate. So apparently it was so slowed down that about all it could do was bounce off and just leave a little bit of a mark on that plate. So it looks like removing that foam and actually having that hard fiberglass plate directly behind the steel supported the steel plate well enough that it actually did a better job of stopping that 30-06 bullet. Now, I want to be sure again to point out, these are 30-06 hunting rounds. So this is a soft tip bullet. This does not by any means indicate that a true full metal jacket 30-06 bullet would be stopped by this combination of steel plate and fiberglass plate backing it. But I will say that it definitely outperformed my expectations. Honestly, I expected the 30-06 to blast right through everything, especially considering that this plate is only rated at level 3. And to my knowledge, the level 3 is not really supposed to be able to stop either the 5.56 or the 30-06 round. Now, after I did this test, I took the metal plate out of the way and I just shot the fiberglass plate with the 5.56. and as you can well imagine, the bullet went right through there without any problem. So this particular fiberglass plate, at least the 22 layers with the resin, definitely not anywhere near adequate to stop a rifle round. Now, I didn't happen to have any kind of pistol with me that day, so for a future project, I probably will take just that fiberglass plate and shoot it with, maybe 9mm 357 Magnum, just to see how strong that fiberglass is. So I guess to summarize, the combination of a level 3 armor plate, at least from Spartan, and this particular style and thickness of fiberglass plate, if you put them together, there's a good chance that they will stop, let's say, some common rifle rounds, but I would definitely not stack this up against, let's say, armor-piercing type of rounds, and there is no way I would actually bet my life on this combination stopping virtually anything. But it has been a fun and interesting test. I feel like I learned a lot, and I think it's a good starting point for me to do some more experimentation, at least as I have time and interest to do that. So I guess I'll wrap this up. Thanks again for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And as always, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, have a wonderful time, and we'll see you in the next video.